On today's episode of The Next, our guest is Brian Balfour, founder and CEO of Reforge. Now, I've known Brian a long time, dating back to his Viximo days, which must have been 2007, 2008. Since founding Viximo, Brian went on to found several companies, including Boundless Learning, an education platform. He was also the vice president of growth at HubSpot, where he led growth initiatives for new products, particularly within the sales product division. And now he's been building Reforge since 2016. Now, his story is interesting for a number of reasons. One, he's a multiple-time venture-backed founder, and now he's scaling Reforge, where they've raised a bunch of venture money, and he's trying to balance being a venture-backed founder with being a dad. I can certainly relate to that, and that's one of the driving forces of my journey, is how to build different in a way that can enable me to not compromise either of those things. Brian also, in his seat at Reforge, particularly is helping practitioners, but a lot of product people, to understand how their craft is changing and how to incorporate AI. So he's doing a lot with AI to help train practitioners. They're doing a lot with AI internally, and they actually just made an acquisition of an AI company to help them with their internal tooling. Now, we cover a lot in this episode, not just in terms of Reforge and some of the trials and tribulations that they've gone through. We also talk about how Brian has managed to balance it all, what he's doing well, what he wishes he was doing better, and how he's been navigating that. And we talk about the future of how startups get built and funded, the role that AI can play, the risks, the opportunities, how they're thinking about it at Reforge, and how you might want to think about it as you go off and either start a venture or figure out how to incorporate these tools into your job. At any rate, I hope you enjoy it. But before we get started, I'm Jason Jacobs, and this is The Next. It's not really a show, it's more of a learning journey to explore how founders can build ambitious companies while being present for family and not compromising flexibility and control, and also how emerging AI tools can assist with that. Each week, we bring on guests who are at the tip of the spear on redefining how ambitious companies get built, and selfishly, the goal is for this to help me better understand how to do that myself while bringing all of you along for the ride. Not sure where this is going to go, but it's going to be fun. Okay, Brian Balfour, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's been a long time.
It has, yeah. I remember, this was right around the time that I was looking to start Runkeeper Up. I started it in 2008, so I don't think I'd quite started yet, but you were like a legend in the Boston founder circles, which comprised of 10 people.
Yeah. So small pond. Yes. Small pond
like,
for sure.
Man, here's this young guy right out of school and he raised $5 million and he's doing the kind of stuff that supposedly only gets done in the Valley, and he's right here in Boston. And that was quite a rare thing at that time.
Yeah, look, you actually have a great memory because you're right. It was $5 million. That was the exact round. And it was odd for Boston, right? That was a early social gaming virtual goods company. Like even before the Facebook platform was taken off, Boston East Coast was just not known for that whatsoever. And it was a wild ride. I'm happy to go deeper into the lessons learned from that. That was a crazy start to the career.
Oh, we have a lot of stuff to cover, but why don't we do two things? One, I want to tell you why I'm so excited that you came on. And okay. I want to give you a little bit of context for what I'm up to, just to frame the discussion as well. Cool?
Sounds good.
Okay. Actually, I guess I'll start with me first. I'm on this wild journey. It's like a public learning journey, and it's two parts. One part is like, how do I build different in a way that I can keep the outsized ambition that I've always had and that I'm addicted to, but be a lot more present with family, right? So like, how do I be fully present with family without compromising ambition? Is another way to say it. And secondarily, like, how is AI transforming how startups get built and funded, and what the implications might be for someone like me that wants to build different, and if I might be able to leverage AI to help. So that's the journey. Why I'm so excited to reach out to you is, one, I guess a bunch of reasons, but you've been an entrepreneur a long time, and you are steeped in the way that traditionally technology products have been brought to market. In fact, your business has been helping people do it better, right? And also, it seems from a distance that you have really leaned hard into these emerging tools and helping traditional skill sets adapt. And you just did an acquisition, so you're also eating your own dog food and using these tools internally. For all of those reasons and more, I was psyched for this discussion.
Yeah. I actually have a question for you to start us off, though. Did
Go
this
for
come
it.
from a place of thinking about Runkeeper and lessons learned of, oh, I wish I could have built it a little bit differently? Is that where this desire, this intersection of how can I build differently at the intersection of family, ambition, and AI? Or is it something else? What's the source?
That's a good question. And it's actually something that came up on a recent prior episode because, or I can't remember if I was recording or not, but but the conversation was essentially, hey, for me, this is family and life stage driven,
Yeah.
but this isn't just a journey about balancing parenting and ambition. It is a
Yeah.
journey to discover how to work different for anyone that wants to work different for whatever reason they want to work different. For me, it's a life stage thing that it's like, gosh, my kids are about to turn 13 and about to turn 10. And during the pandemic, I got so wrapped up in their activities, especially my older boy with his sports. And
Oh, okay.
it's like a full-time job, right? It's so hard. And then so traditional 9 to 5s, especially ones that involve travel and not being the master of your own calendar and things like that, like it's just really hard to make it fit. But at the same time, I don't want to be like an advisor or a fractional this or a CEO coach or a recruiter. Or, I want to build shit. I want to build big shit. I want to build an empire, right? And so it's how do you do that in a way that you have these outside constraints? You have to do it your way in a way that you have that flexibility and control are paramount. So that's what's driving it.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense to me. Yours are a little bit older than mine. Mine are 5 and about to turn 3, both boys. And yeah, it's been a push and pull on those two fronts.
You mentioned that when I reached out to you, and maybe we can start there because Reforge, I actually, for whatever reason, I thought that Reforge was the Aaron White style, no outside capital, fully in control of your own destiny, but you've raised a boatload of capital.
We
It
did.
turns out the benefit of hindsight now that your kids are starting to get older. How do you feel about that?
It's been, so I should actually back up. Okay. Some of the family stuff, it's all intertwined. It's all intertwined. So
Take it from wherever you'd like, Brian. And normally we do context and we work our way into the good stuff. And this time for whatever reason, I was impatient. So if you want to take a stab and
I'm going to get
give some
deep.
color. Yeah.
I'm going to get deep and real very, very fast here. For those that don't know, I started Reforge. It's actually been close to 10 years ago now, which is insane to think about. First 4 years of the business, we actually bootstrapped to over 10 million in revenue. The company was incredibly profitable. And so you look at that and you wonder, like a lot of people would look at that and think, oh my God, like massive success. I would love that. I will say though, in the moment, it did not feel like that. It did not feel like it was like fulfilling. And this is part of the pro and the dark side of the ambition, because the ambition was both pushing me as well as making me feel empty at the same time. And like around this experience, around this time, actually, before we
Excited about what you were just saying that I kicked the door of this little phone booth open, so I had to shut it.
Before we raised money, my wife and I had a very unfortunate experience. We had a daughter that passed away at birth suddenly.
Gosh.
And that was obviously a very kind of, there was a moment, it was the first time in my life that I had lost and experienced like a tragedy around like somebody that was like super close to me, obviously our daughter and my wife. And so as you do in that time, you reassess everything in life. You're like, why the hell am I doing this? And I had a bunch of guilt too, because I wasn't as present as I could have been like during that pregnancy and all of those pieces. And I think in that moment, as I went through both like that grieving period and processing and all of that stuff, one of the things that actually came out of it was there was a lot of depth to why I was doing what I was doing, the entrepreneurial journey, that ambition. And so as part of that decision, I was like, if I'm going to be doing this, I want to be doing it to the fullest possible extent that I can. And that can take many pieces. That can take many paths for people. But at the time, the business was doing well enough and we had so much demand that it was very easy for us to raise venture capital. That was our Series A.
What year was this?
This was
19?
20,
19?
maybe?
Okay.
Yeah, something around there.
So it was 20 and 22, the two rounds?
Yeah, and so then the Series B came very close after that. The Series B, I believe, was only like 12 months afterwards, maybe 18 months. We hadn't spent any of the Series A money. The company had more than tripled in that short time period. Like it was like just like a pure rocket ship. And it felt like there was just this insatiable appetite for what we were doing. And so in the moment, everything felt okay. This makes total sense. Like, let's do the Series B. We did a big Series B. And then literally 2 months later, during my parental leave for our first son, was when the tech market just totally crashed. Came back from parental leave like super early. We ended up in like this absolute like replanning cycle around just redoing our goals, trying to figure out what was going to happen with the budgets. And the next couple years on that was just like a very hard journey of multiple rifts, dealing with slash budgets. We were in the bullseye. That tech market downturn, multiple things happened. One is that most of our customers were technology companies, which were the hardest hit. Two is that we were premium priced in the market, which also was a problem at the time. And then the third was that we were on a budget line item that was typically the first to be slashed. So it was just like a triple whammy for us. And that ended up being like a really hard thing to deal with. Now, had I known that was all going to happen, would I have raised the Series A and Series B at the time? No, it like would have been better to keep the company bootstrapped and stuff. But that's the bet. That's the dice roll that you would take as a founder. And I knew what I was getting into. It's not like I hadn't done this before.
You don't have to answer this, but I hope you took some secondary in one of those rounds.
Yes. And I did. And I don't know if I would have raised if that wasn't possible at the time, given like the family situation. And I actually think this is like all the VCs out there that honestly bitch and moan about founders taking secondary. You have no idea how you are being perceived by founders. You are doing yourself a disservice, right? Like you are sitting in a seat where you're saying, I'm going to take a bunch of diversified bets and a really nice fee. And you're complaining about founders taking a little bit of money off the table along the way so that they can feel more comfortable taking these really high risk bets. Come on. Anyway, so I get really super annoyed with it. Now, there's other rounds where I've seen founders take hundreds of millions off the table and then leave 6 months later. That's a different scenario. 95% of folks that take secondary off the table are not for those reasons. It's for the reasons to be able to keep taking bigger and bigger bets. And that was the reason that was like the reason that I took it along the time. But anyways, it's like, it's taking the bet in the moment with the information that you have. And when the information we had at the time was all signs were like flashing, like amazing. And unfortunately now in hindsight, we know that a healthy chunk of that was due to ZERP and some like post-COVID demand pull forward, as well as a couple other things. And then of course we didn't see AI coming around the corner either, but that's both been a challenge, but has turned into our opportunity as well, which I'm happy to talk about that. But that was a little bit of the evolution, is that it actually started with a family moment, and like a very unfortunate family moment. And ever since, it's been a learning journey about how to embrace the ambition, but in a healthy way. Now that I've got 2 boys and raising them and trying to share this ambition with them in a healthy way.
Now, I want to poke on that, and I don't know what's too personal or not. And so wherever you don't want to go, just don't
go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. But you talked about how the ambition was coming from a much deeper place. So that's one thing I want to just poke on to the extent you're comfortable talking about it. And then the other piece is, once you had that realization, there was a fork in the road. One way you could have responded is, oh, I felt guilt I wasn't there for the pregnancy. I'm going to be a lot more present. But it sounds like you almost went the other way and got even more ambitious. So I wanted to ask you about that as well.
I think it's an and, not an or. It's okay. I started recognizing and tapping into this ambition in a deeper way, understanding it better, but also understanding the flip side of it, which is there's a healthy and an unhealthy portion of it. And so I guess let's tackle a couple different things here, because you asked where it came from. So I think I've talked to a lot of founders. A lot of founders get their ambition, get their ideas from a lot of different places. Sometimes it's that they grew up in like a hard environment or something, and that environment really stoked the energy for them or some other reason. And for me, none of those things were true. Actually, I grew up, I had great parents, and neither of them were entrepreneurs. So it's not like I got it from my family. I grew up outside of Detroit during the time where all the car companies were going south. And so there wasn't like really a lot of entrepreneurial spirit in that environment around the time that I was growing up. So I didn't get it from my parents. I didn't get it from my environment. It's not like I had a hard childhood. Like I lower middle class family, both parents were teachers, but we were comfortable, like all that kind of stuff. And I like had to go through this journey. I was like, why the hell am I doing this? And where I eventually got to was, and this is going to sound maybe a little too woo woo for folks, but it wasn't that I was like trying to rationalize, oh, I got it from somebody else or someplace else. And I finally had this realization that actually I was just like born with it. And it's just a core part of who I am as a person. And if I ignore it, then I'm really ignoring who I am and a little bit of like why I feel like I'm here on earth. And then I had all these memories and all these things come back to me around all of these times during my childhood where I was like trying to start like little businesses and little projects and all of these pieces, and who helped stoke it and who was actually and who were the ones that laughed at it or did the opposite, tried to push it back, like all of these different pieces. And so that discovery was like a very huge moment for me, because I realized it was like, hey, if I ignore it, I just can't push it to the side. So that gets into the second.
Was it solo process, or did
Oh
you
no.
work with a coach or a psychologist
Yeah.
or anything like that?
Coaches, therapy, yeah, all the things. And friends too. I have a lot of peers like a group of peers that I have, but a mixture of coaches and therapists helped. Yeah.
So once you uncovered, oh, this is who I am, this is who I'm meant to be. If I try to suppress it, it's going to be like clipping the wings of an eagle or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Then how did that manifest in terms of the decision to answers itself? But I'll ask you anyway. It's like, how did that manifest in terms of the decision to go deeper into, or to get more, ratchet up the ambition with Reforge? And also, how did that manifest at home?
Yeah, I think the struggle with the ambition, at least for me personally at home, is obviously what I do as a founder and CEO is deeply stressful. And I'm in problem solving mode all day long. That's just like problem. Right. And it's very easy to carry all of that weight with you outside of the work environment, especially because I work from home most of the time now too. So I don't even have physical separation in my environment. and I think that the thing that I've thought like very deeply about is that if I let the negative parts of it, if I bring the negative parts of it into the home, then my family, including my kids, will grow to despise it. And I want the exact opposite thing, is I actually want to share the ambition with them in a healthy way. Like I don't care what they do for and ending up their profession, but going back to those stories I was mentioning, it's like the people that I recognize like really helped stoke that ambition and encourage it and shape it are the most impactful people in my life. And so as a father, I want them to look to me as one of the most impactful people in their lives. And part of the challenge is, how do you share it with them in a healthy way? Because a lot of founders were certainly born from a place where their parents shared it in a very unhealthy way, like just tons of pressure and negative consequences from that. And so that's like the challenge is, and the thing that I think I've thought about the most over the past few years and continue to think about, which is as they grow up, like how do I like bring them, how do I help them see the positive sides of it, not just the negative sides of it? Because the negative sides are way easier to share with the family. Because you come home and you're just like, I want to unload. And if you just do that over and over again, I think it has consequences.
Well, one of the things that I'm finding is that, and again, my kids are a little older, but my older boy, who right now it's largely divide and conquer just because his schedule's nuts. But I pick him up at school almost every day, at least during hockey season, and with so much time in the car, and it's not just riding in traffic, it's helping him with his homework, talking about his day. He's really inquisitive. He asks me tons of questions just about random stuff. It's a lot of quality time, and it's not something, I mean, you could outsource it to the equivalent of a reliable, trusted Uber driver, right? But there's a lot of parenting that can't be outsourced. Or I guess it can, because most people do it by necessity. But the fact that I've been there for it already, I don't want to miss a second of it. And so it's almost like my whole professional life, my ambition has been purely professional. And all of a sudden, I feel a lot of parenting ambition, which is a weird thing to say, but it's not
That's
just
a way to put it.
being around to go through the motions. It's no, like, what projects can we take on? Like, how do I help them unlock and find their purpose and find their passion and get different skill sets and learn good discipline and work ethic and structure and be courteous and respectful. And there's so much that goes into it that I just don't want to miss. And I feel like 6 years ago, they were 6 and 3, and in 6 more years, like, one of them's gone, right? And yeah, so anyway, I don't even know where I'm going with that, but
It's definitely the struggle. I have the routines as well. I'm here 95% of every morning and every night. My wife is a nurse, so she works these weird.
my wife is a nurse.
Oh yeah, so you're probably used to this. She works 3 random days a week. She's gone from 6 a.m. until 8:30, 9 p.m.
312s.
And it's hard. It's not your typical like routine schedule. And for me, part of it is that I'm here every morning for the kids, and I'm here almost every single night, which means that part of the things that I've cut out of my life is that I don't travel as much. I don't go to a bunch of events and all those pieces, and that's okay. That's not going to make or break the business, or it's not going to make or break the business, but it would probably make and break the family a little bit. And so there are trade-offs. Like there are things that I've cut out of my life in order to make it all work. But I feel the ambition around the family as well. And of course, the question that always rolls around in my head is, do I look back in 20 years and I'm like, that Saturday morning that I spent solving that work problem, should I have just spent that with my kids, like, or not? And that, anyways, that's a bit of the tug of war that I feel on a consistent basis. But having the routine is at least helpful to make sure there's like a base to build from.
Brian, we haven't talked much about Reforge's business, but you mentioned that as AI was, you mentioned that you went through a bunch of turbulence, and you also mentioned that AI was both a threat and an opportunity. Can you talk about, you mentioned the triple whammy, right, with the line item and the premium product, and what was the third one? The third one?
The line item that most of our customers were technology companies, which got hit the hardest. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So you mentioned that, right? But when did AI rear its head in that picture? How did it first come to your attention? What were your initial thoughts about it? And then maybe talk a bit about that journey, both individually and as a company, in terms of how your thinking and acting around it has evolved.
Yeah. So it first started almost exactly 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. So every Christmas, like New Year's, Reforge typically takes a full week to week and a half, maybe longer off. And for the last 5 years, I basically spend a good chunk of that time, not just with family, but also going deep on something like really new. And multiple years ago, it was like crypto and blockchain. I was like, what is this? I wanted to understand that. But 2 years ago, it was AI. And I basically came out of that. And I came out with 2 thoughts, which was simultaneously, 1, this is going to be very disruptive to education. And 2, this is also going to be very disruptive to how product teams work and work at the intersection of both of those. And so we basically had this evaluation do we, as we take the next turn on the company, do we want to pursue the disruptive line down education and be those ones? Or do we want to leverage everything that we know across thousands and thousands of product teams and hundreds of thousands of product managers and play more in that direction and help them with the disruption? And as many things, there wasn't like really a right answer. But at the end of the day, what it came down to was we felt, 1, we were much more passionate in helping build the products for product teams to become what we call AI native. And we can talk a little bit about what that means. 2 is that from a company perspective, we not only have all the relationships and assets, but 3 is, I think, a huge part of the shift is not just going to be new tools. More than half of it is knowledge change, behavior change, and skill sets. And so the education product still plays a pretty important role in helping product teams make that transition. That's versus, I think, the education path, where I think where we're going in education is free or close to free. You will be able to instantly generate a very personalized course to you to any depth around any topic, including not just text, but like video and images. Like that's where I think this ends. And
Oh wait, I have to interject and ask you one question. Do you have college funds for the kids?
we do, but I question them on a daily basis. Yeah, they're more of like a safety like bet at this point. So it's so yes, and I think and so I looked at that. I was like, look, are we the most passionate about making that future a reality, or are we best and most excited about making this other future a reality?
And
And that's where we
tell me
ended.
again about the other future. So the first future is helping product teams be more AI native. What's the second one?
The second one was the education one. The second one is who's going to build the product that you go to it, Jason, and you say, I want to learn about X. It asks you a few questions to understand your level of depth, and it instantly generates a personalized text, video, images included, personalized to you, to the right depth, ties to concepts and things that it already knows about you. Like that's where that ends up. And look, I know for a fact that some of the big folks, the big new players, want that to be part of their future, meaning like that is a product that they want to build.
I guess I'm conceptually, couldn't you do the second to enable the first, or are they separate and distinct and I'm just not getting
So
it?
I think first, I think we got to talk a little bit about what AI native product teams means. I think there's obviously a lot being written about AI, and I think that can very easily make people think that it's like hyping. It's just too much hype. And there is a lot of hype. Don't get me wrong about that. But I think that leads us to underestimating the amount of change that is going to happen around how we build products. And it leads us overestimating. Okay. Yeah, underestimating is the right one. So I think we're underestimating. Most people are underestimating how much change is going to happen. Because if you look at the previous shift of just on-prem to cloud, you can go down a list of things and say, what are all the things that changed? We shifted our product development process way more from waterfall to things that looked like much more like agile. There was a whole new tool space that emerged around to enable that product development process and how we build products today. So there was like the whole set of tools that we were using. There were new roles and org structures that emerged in order to enable that product development process. There were new business models like subscription, which enabled new growth models like PLG, right? The list goes on and on. And so when you look at history, I look at AI and I'm like, it's going to change every single one of these categories to a similar amount, if not more, in a faster period of time. That's the other component of this. And I just think AI native product teams, there's two things that are happening right now. There are teams that are starting fresh with these tools from the ground up, and I think they will think, work, and build differently. And then there's going to be a set of historical teams that also transition to being AI native, right? And then there's going to be a third bucket who are unfortunately like too slow, and that happens with every technology shift. And so I was way more excited about, okay, how do we build the suite of products to help product teams operate in this new world? And I looked at a bunch of...
Had you historically been a suite of products company, or was the education most of the
We
path?
had one education product. Yeah, we had one education product. That was the only product. Yeah.
So it
was a huge change. And there's a very big difference between an education product and like more like SaaS, like software tooling. And so I looked at a bunch of categories of what are all the different categories of tools that product teams adopt and buy, went through them and thought about, okay, what are some of the most likely ones to change because of AI, on what timelines? And we ended up with a top few. And then we went through this whole process of, okay, do we want to build or buy? And one of the problems areas I landed on is what we call the feedback fragmentation tax. It's all these companies are collecting all of this qualitative data about your customers in sales tools like Gong, CRM, support, user research, like all this kind of stuff. But it's spread out across all these different tools. Everyone has a different owner. And so for a product team to get access to that valuable customer information, it's just too high friction. Most teams don't even bother. And so I looked at about 12 plus teams that had started to work on this problem of like, how do you bring all this data into one place? How do you use AI to help automatically analyze it? How do you make it actionable? All these pieces. And we found a team and a product in a company called Monterey.ai that they were just hands down the best by far of all the ones that we looked at. And their vision aligned with ours. And we acquired them late last year, relaunched it as Insight Analytics early this year. And the product's been like, teams are just deeply resonating with it and adopting it.
The first product that you launched?
That's the first one. And then we've got 2 more, maybe 3 if stretch goal this year. Because I think every single step of this product development process is going to change. Yeah.
In terms of who it's for, you're switching from training to products and tools, but is the customer the same?
It is, yeah. So one of the things about the education business is that we always sold to the functional leader, the product leader, and never, very rarely to the L&D person. And the reason is that the L&D people are typically buying a benefit for the organization. And as a result, they have a very different checklist. And usually they're trying to find the cheapest thing that covers the broadest swath of topic areas. And so that's why you see like a Udemy or a Coursera or something like that kind of sell into L&D versus us is our topics were much deeper. They're expert led, all these things. And so we're trying to help the product leader solve a business problem. And so as a result, like we always sold into the product leader. And it's the same thing with these new products. I think the thing that's changing with product teams though is like the blending of all of these roles is that some PMs are taking on some design and ninja responsibilities. You also see all the vice versa going. So when I say product teams, we're selling into product teams inclusive of not just product managers, but we think about how design, eng, and some of these adjacent roles play in the mix as well.
What did you do with the existing business?
Oh, it's still going. It's still a big part of it. I think, like I said, we very much believe this transition to AI native product teams is both part of it is retooling, but part of it is working a different way. And to get your team to work a different way, there needs to be new knowledge, new skills, new training, and new behaviors, right, as part of it. And that's the part of the education business really plays, is that for most of our customers, we're not just giving you a new tool, we're going to help you solve the shift much more holistically than anybody else out there.
I know it's early, but if you had to guess directionally, will the bias be more build in-house or acquire as it relates to additional products over time?
It's a good question that we keep debating. And it will always be a mix. The question is like, what percentage of the mix do we go? And I don't know what that exact percentage will be. My guess is, at least over the next couple of years, it's probably going to be half and half. We're planning on making a couple more acquisitions, as well as we have a couple in-house things that we want to build as well, but we're being aggressive on getting to the suite fast.
And how are you thinking about and utilizing AI internally? And also, how are you utilizing it in terms of the training, creation, and or delivery, like the other side of the business?
Yeah. So I'll actually start with, I talked to quite a few product leaders and other leaders every single day. And of course, one of the number one topics is they're like, oh, like I want my team to be using more AI products and stuff. And I'm like, have you carved out the time for them to do it? Most of the time, the answer is no. And I think that's actually a very big hurdle at the moment, is that all teams are under a lot of pressure under their normal goals. And they've got this other thing going on, which is like AI is reshaping everything. And as a result, I think the teams are really struggling with, how do I get my team to adopt these tools and figure out what is the right way to use them inside our organization? And just because they're not carving out the time to allow people to experiment and figure things out. And at least internally at Reforge, these things are highly encouraged every single time something new comes out like Operator or ChatGPT Deep Research, we are having multiple people use it, play with it, report back on what they're learning. There's active discussions in Slack around it. We're encouraging the product teams to use the latest models as they come out, like via API and all of these other pieces. And so we're using it in our products. We're using it in content creation and as well. And I think the best, to give you a sense, is it used to take us, let me see, like 6 months and a team of, let's call it 4 full-time people to create one of our courses. It now takes one person 5 weeks.
And I should know this, but are these live courses or what's the format?
Both. You can get them on both. You can get them on demand, and we serve them live through cohorts. So
Are the instructors employees of Reforge?
No. We basically get executives that are like in between gigs, like thinking about their next things and they use this as just a thing to do as they try to figure out what their next thing is. And so it's bringing more operational experience into the mix rather than trying to hire full-time teachers.
Have you paid much attention to what Every's up to? Dan Schipper?
Every?
Yeah.
I do not. No.
They're much smaller, but what's interesting about them is that they write a lot about AI, and they tend to write, I think, for more of an insider crowd. It's pretty technical and in depth, and the writing helps inform what products to build. And then the products are both distribution, or they launch on a waitlist basis, so they get a big waitlist, which then becomes readers, right? But also the learning they get from getting their hands dirty and from shipping product and what works and what doesn't work and how to convert and all that helps them be better writers. So that's one synergy across. But the other is that they talk a lot about how content and code are intersecting, right? And increasingly content is becoming the language of creation. So I just wanted to throw all that. I feel like I'm pimping them all the time, but I'm just fascinated by the synergy. And I'm also, I think it's every.2 TO. Yeah. Dan's going to come on the pod in a month or two.
Okay.
I'll send you the episode once it's live. But yeah, I'm just curious what you think about having more crossover versus keeping them so separate and distinct.
Yes, the knowledge from the learning products will feed some of the new like AI products that we're launching, though. You have to think about the use case about learning. Most of the time, somebody is either in learning mode or not learning mode.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's this thing of
I'm in learning mode.
Yeah, there's this wish of like always be learning. The reality is that is not how 99% of people engage in learning. It's much more of an episodic need, and as a result, it just like creates a different product experience. I think where the other intersection for us is, look, as we create all of our new AI courses, which is essentially the number one focus right now, and we do it with outside subject matter experts, the amount of like ideas that inform our own strategy and our own products is like, there's a nice connection point there. Every time I'm doing one of these research sessions with a subject matter expert, in my head, I'm going through, okay, how would I apply this to Reforge? And like new insights emerge, and that helps us not only create the best educational content, but it also is going to help us create some of the best products.
Are you finding that AI, you mentioned it's impacting efficiency. Is it actually getting to impacting either number of hires or the profiles that you're hiring for in material ways?
In a short term, yes. So sorry, those were two dimensions, the number of people and the profile of people.
Yeah, like how much is it affecting the number, and also how much is it changing what you need skill set wise?
For years, we've basically had, for the last few years, we've had the value of, we just believe small teams do bigger things. And so we've always kept much smaller teams. I think just with bigger teams, you end up with what I refer to as like work around the work. It's all the coordination tasks.
And when you say small teams, do you mean like a bunch of small teams, or do you mean in the aggregate, like it's just a small team,
Both.
or is it both?
Both.
Yeah. Can you quantify? I don't know if it's public, but.
Like right now we're 30 people, I would say,
okay.
And the business is in the tens of millions per year. But yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I just think smaller teams build better products. There's like more minds.
Is your how are you thinking about the toggle between profitability and growth?
Right now we're break even and we're sitting on a huge pile of cash. And part of that is, I think, as you go through like any major transition, I think it's wise to
Yeah.
have your thumb on a couple, like what I would call gates to get through before you start burning burning a lot of cash. We are very close to those gates. And so on a daily basis, I'm waking up every morning, fighting myself of ready to get like more aggressive versus staying disciplined at the same time. That is a battle, especially when every single day you are seeing new exciting products being launched. But yeah,
What would you be doing if you had more resource that you can't, what, because you're
today
disciplined? Yeah.
it would just be it would just be starting to seed more bets in the product suite. So we have
Hmm.
about, I would call it like 15 product categories that we want to go after. And we have one launched and two, what I would call baking. And I would love to put the ingredients together for number three and number four, or sorry, number four and number five. And so that would probably be one area. I think the second thing is there is a lot more AI educational stuff that we could create that I think will help our teams. And I would love to go a little bit faster on those pieces. But those are pretty much like the two main areas is more product and more help in education for our customers.
If you take a step back, you're interesting because you're running a venture-backed company, and it's a venture-backed company that works with lots of other venture-backed companies, and you're specifically working with them around bringing products to market and that process, and now increasingly pushing on AI. So you are uniquely equipped to answer this question, which is,
Oh boy.
how do you think AI will affect how startups are built and funded?
Ooh, common narrative, right? The narrative right now is that there will be like the one person billion
Hmm.
dollar
Yeah, I
company.
think, was it Sam Altman that said that? He says a lot of things,
He's,
but I think that's one of the things he
yeah, I
said.
don't know who said
Yeah.
it, right?
It was
Well,
like, if it wasn't Sam Altman, it was like a Sam Altman type who said
yeah.
it.
Well, first, let me ask what you think about that. Do you buy
Oh,
into that narrative?
do I buy into that narrative? I think there's gates. One gate, or there's bookends, right? One bookend is a unit of human is a unit of work, right? Like laying bricks or something, right? And then the other is one mad scientist and an agent army, right? Like the Pied Piper of, and actually, maybe you don't even need the one mad scientist. Maybe it's AGI that's running the agent army, right? With no humans. And I think it is early days, but that directionally more will be automated. But there's a lot of questions and just crap to work out in terms of human in the loop. Like, how much does a human need to be in the loop? What types of things does the human need to be in the loop on? Are there standards? Is there a certification body? Who says that this thing is there the equivalent of the FDA for AI built products? So there's just so much to figure out, and I think, and also behavior change is hard. I know that firsthand. I just think it's, in a way, I think we're back to where you started. Like, we're probably overestimating what will happen in the next 12 months and underestimating what will happen in the next 10 years.
Yeah, look, I think
But how did you
I
trick
think a
me into
lot
answering my tough question for you?
yeah, yeah. Look, I think a lot of people think about this as an or versus an and. And so I think my guess is multiple things happen at once. Will there be smaller teams of people that build bigger things relative to what they were able to build historically? Yes. Does that mean that's the only way and we won't have like big companies anymore? No. And there's a few reasons for this. I think one is that the $1 billion one person company, it's not just what you can build, but it's what you can distribute. And one of the constraints that I don't think people are thinking about is this technology shift has not come with a new distribution platform yet. Casey Winters has talked about this a little bit. We've talked a little bit about this on Reforge. Whereas like mobile it did come with a new distribution platform, so did the internet. And so to get to $1 billion,
To probably say what he's building is the new distribution platform.
yeah, but there's tons of people working on it. And of course, maybe something like ChatGPT becomes like a new distribution platform. But to be honest, the way that OpenAI has been operating so far is that they want to eat it all. I don't think it's actually like a pretty safe bet. So, and the reason that a lot of these AI companies are going from 0 to 10, 0 to 20 million super fast is a temporary thing. It's a very word of mouth viral mechanism for companies that are targeting prosumers and PLG. But you do not see the same growth curve happening on enterprise companies with more of an enterprise motion and targeting a different customer set. And it's being fueled by the novelty of AI right now. Eventually that wears off, right? And when it wears off, we're back to the basics on distribution, which is you've got to understand where your customers are living online. You've got to figure out those distribution channels that you can play in and the value. And it's going to be a lot of work.
I
And
think you
and
just
that,
called
so
it, you just compared Cursor to HQ Trivia, I feel like.
I think it has more staying power than HQ Trivia. I'm just saying that there are some parallels to some of the viral blast off of the early Facebook platform days and what we're experiencing right now with a lot of these new A products. The other thing is that, to your point, yes, a lot of things are going to get automated, which is phenomenal. But you want to know what happens when things get automated? We find more things we want to do, right?
That's called like Jevons paradox, is that right?
Oh yes, that's part of it. Yeah, like Jevons paradox is like the classic example is you've got a traffic jam outside of the city, so somebody says build more highways, and that just increases the demand for traffic, and you still end up with a larger traffic jam. And it's the same thing that we see is even with our product insight analytics is that it takes away tons of rote work that teams had to do before to get value out of the data and enables them to do a lot more than that. But as a result of that, they have even more questions that they now want answered, right? And more data analysis that they want to do. And so we tend to, just like as human beings, as we automate things, fill that empty space with other things that can potentially create value. Because there are a lot of things inside organizations and product teams specifically, where I focused that time, where they're like, I think I could get value if we do this, but the cost is too high. Therefore, we don't do it. And if you bring the cost down enough, then all of a sudden those things start to fill the space. And so what that starts to point to is, yes, maybe we're in this temporary period where overall teams just start smaller and stuff. But at the end of the day, to build the most ambitious things, I think will require teams of people. And as a result, I think it's an and. I think there's opportunity for new small teams to build things that were bigger that were ever possible before. And there are going to be massive new big outcomes that require large teams of people. So I think both happen.
And we've talked about technology and what it will enable, but what about just in terms of more societal evolution? Do you think the startup culture of 24/7 and burnout and tons of stress and sticking a bunch of frogs in the pot and boiling the water and seeing if one or two can hop out while the rest of them fry, is that going to carry on? What is the future of venture capital more generally?
I think the future of venture capital is more impacted by the number of new investors that have flooded the market over the past 10 years. And yes, there's been some decline, but nothing incredibly substantial. And so as a result, there is plenty of money available to raise. And when there's plenty of money available to raise, it tends to find, its way into funding people for reasons that I don't think we even think about. Honestly, a lot of founders raise money not because they need it, is because it's a validation mechanism for them. And I think for us to say that all of a sudden that basic human need of validation disappears, I feel like it's not going to happen. Right? It's just other dumb egos. Now, do I hope that there's a whole new world of entrepreneurs that are empowered, that realize that they don't have to raise that money to get validation and are more fulfilled by the things that they build and the value they deliver their customers? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think historically, maybe sometimes that path has been looked down upon, but a lot of value has been created in other ways. And I think sometimes founders just get tunnel vision on, hey, there's one way to build this company, and they don't really understand all of the options. I would also say at the same time is I think some of the 24/7 type of mentality, its bookends is you have two arguments, which is there's the perfect work-life balance folks, and there's the you have to grind 24/7 and sacrifice everything types of folks. And what I find from most of my peers is they're all somewhere in the middle. None of them are on the bookends. And for some reason, those are just the narratives that tend to like resonate externally. And these are peers. Some of them are
That's
way
not just true with startups. That's certainly true in politics.
Yeah, and
a lot of
look,
things.
some of these peers are way more successful than me. They're running a $2-3 billion company, and so it's like of all sizes. People have found somewhere in the middle on that spectrum for them. So I don't think it's an either or.
Now, as optionality increases because people can do more with less and maybe in more cases don't need to raise external funding or maybe could raise less, it also means that their competitors, the same thing happens. So I'm wondering, what do you think the impact will be in terms of capital needs, in terms of time to exit, in terms of size of exit, and in terms of risk? And what happens with moats in a world where anyone can spin up a new thing quicker and easier than the person before?
I think that what we were saying before is that distribution becomes the bottleneck for sure. And just because you can build things at the speed of computers doesn't mean people adopt things at the speed of computers. And so that's where the bottleneck ends up. Now, it doesn't feel like there's a bottleneck on that right now, because once again, it's just the environment is in a place where there's just a huge audience of adopters that are willing to try anything because everything's so new and so cool. But to your point, as more and more things kind of flood the market, that eventually wears off, and we're back to like distribution ends up being the really hard thing. And by the way, it becomes harder because we will see the degradation of the distribution platforms that have built the companies of the past 20 years. We are already, yes, the decline of SEO, I think, is probably overhyped at this point, but there is writing on the wall. It's happening slow and then it'll happen fast type of deal. And I think that'll happen to other channels as well. So you've got things working from both ends, which is more things flooding the market. That doesn't mean people will adopt them at the same speed, and less places for you to like really distribute your product. And so that just, I think, puts a squeeze. I think that ends up putting a squeeze on distribution and growth.
The last couple of things. One is I have something I'd love to get your advice on, and the other is I have an idea I want to run by you.
Okay.
Does that work?
Let's
All
do
right.
it.
So the advice is just that I've got this content machine, like newsletter, podcast. Newsletter goes out every week. Right now it's averaging around 2 a week. We'll see. I can turn it up or turn it down. But as the body of work grows, I've been editing myself with the script. I feel like it's on brand that I should be doing most things myself wherever possible, given the nature of the journey. But I'm wondering if I can start picking up things like guest research, like asset creation for promotion. And Descript is doing some of this for sure, but those are just some areas. And then maybe guest scheduling, maybe the clips, right? And again, Descript is doing some of this, but what I'm wondering is, at what point should I be starting to build my own agent army? How should I think about where to start? What criteria should have? Should I learn how to code? Is it time? Do I partner where I've typically been the mouth historically that gets a bunch of smart people around me to do shit? Should I do it differently because these tools are here, or should I just lean on my superpowers? And then how important are architectural decisions about if I know I'm going to have multiple over time as I pick off different pieces of my process to automate? Should they talk? Do they all need to live under the same roof? Because what I see is a fragmented mess in the landscape with all these different tools that are all using the same words.
This is something
there's so
I want.
much overlap. Yeah.
So by the way, I literally was telling, so I also do a podcast with my co-host Fareed called Unsolicited Feedback.
Fareed, I know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. All the Boston connections. And we were talking the other day, from the moment we hit stop recording to publish, the number of just like little buttons we have to push and like tiny things we have to do to get between those 2 points is crazy. And so I look at a lot of these AI products that are taking massive swings, and you know what I really just want as a customer? I just want you to automate all of that boring, low value like tasks that I could easily just spend that time on recording another episode, which is like the actual value creator. And so this is where you really got to experience the workflows to understand the pain. Just going.
I am experiencing that, man. I'm feeling the pain. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, oh man. And
I keep expanding. As of yesterday, I published my first YouTube, and now I've committed that each new episode is going to go on YouTube as well. And then it's another whole bag of crap that I need to add to my to-do list for every episode.
Yeah, it's just
And then it's maybe the clip should go on YouTube Shorts and not just on Twitter, right? And
yeah.
on and
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. And so I do think you're right. It is very fragmented. I think software is very fragmented in a lot of places. And I think you'll see a lot of those fragmented places collapse into one tool, partially
So
because
there'll
of
be
this.
consolidation, you think?
I think there has to be and it's going to be demanded from the buyers, because if you want AI to work really well across these workflows, the two things that you tend to need are pretty well structured and clean data and tools that work really well with each other. Because there's this thing that Dharmesh has written about called the compounding error rate, which is what an agent does is it essentially is making a series of LLM calls as it reasons through the tasks. But every time you call an LLM, it's giving you a probabilistic output. And it's never 100% accurate or correct. You can increase that accuracy through a bunch of methods, but it's almost impossible to ever get it to 100%. And so the problem with this is that even a small error rate, like 5%, across a dozen steps compounds to the point where your output is only right about half the time. It's a coin flip, which doesn't work for most product use cases. And that error rate increases the less clean the underlying data is, and the more the different tools it has to use. So as a result, I think to like fully automate these things, you're basically going to need, people will start adopting consolidated stacks across these different workflows, because that's how the real value of this full automation is going to be unlocked, unless there's some other innovation in AI that massively reduces this error rate in a different way.
Even if I want to set up one agent, I get this whole list of, for this step, here's 5 tools to choose from. For that step, here's 5 tools to choose from. And there's 24 steps with 5 tools to choose from each for one agent. That's not even a hard agent. And it's, oh my God. And then should it be like, it's got to be no code if it's me, but then if it's no code, then I'm like, then does it cost money for every, like, it's tokens or whatever? And then if it's code, I don't know how to code. So do I learn how to code? Do I go to Reforge and take a Python class?
That always comes down to the exact idea and the type of business you want to build. And look, I think a lot of times, like, finding a partner is much more than just about complementing your skill sets. Like that is one axis, but finding a partner is a very big deal, how you work together and commit together. But I think to this point, just looking out the landscape, is companies I feel are taking one of two approaches. They're playing up the capability curve of AI, meaning somebody like Devon.ai, which is a full agent coder, it's trying to replace a full engineer. Like, you just give it a task and it just goes and does everything. But then you have something like Cursor, which is using AI to enhance the person versus replace the person. And you see this playing out in every single category right now, as there tend to be bets in both directions. And I think it's a really interesting question about who's going to win, because the Cursors of the world that are enhancing current people are getting way more traction and revenue adoption much faster. And so the question is can they iterate themselves? Does that give them an advantage to iterating themselves to the Devons of the world faster? Or because Devon is so focused on this singular problem and vision of replacing the engineer, that they actually end up getting there faster as a result? And I think this is a question across all categories. And if you're like thinking about building an AI product, there's a deep question about, do I replace the person or am I enhancing a person? And they're very different strategies and approaches.
Yeah, it reminds me of Fusion. With Fusion, and I'm far from a Fusion expert, but it's like there's ones with less risk of actually working, but if you work, if it works, it's less of a breakthrough. And then there's ones that are way more complicated with way more risk and will take longer and cost more money or whatever. But if they can actually get it, it's a much bigger deal, right? And so it's like, where do you bet? Yeah. And the last one, this is more of a fun one, but basically, so I've got the podcast and the newsletter, and it's created this kind of learning flywheel. And there's a small but mighty peer group that's emerging from the journey so far. And so maybe at some point there'll be some community elements, but that's the serious journey of what's happening in the space and where will it go. And we have serious discussions like this where I use my business voice and stuff. But like I've met a bunch of other middle-aged founders sorting it through, and they tend to be people that they're accomplished, they're experienced, they've got some flexibility, they're still ambitious, but they've got more constraints and they're feeling more mortal and they can't work around the clock like they used to for multiple reasons, etc. And nobody's talking to them, right? You have that show Silicon Valley that was like focused on the hacker and the hustler, like the YC kids, the 20-somethings that drink Red Bull and pull all-night coding benders, right? But who's like telling the stories of these middle-aged founders? So I want to have a show, Silicon Valley, but for Fogie founders, right? And I don't want any gatekeepers, so I want to start the opposite way. I'll start just by fleshing out individual characters on TikTok or Instagram. And if I can build a specific character and bring it to life with feedback from viewers and build a following, then weave them together for some collabs and ultimately maybe make a pilot, and from a pilot turn into a show that's mobile first or mobile only with no gatekeepers, and leverage AI for as much of the production process as possible, because the same way that AI is impacting product managers, software engineers, designers, etc., it's also impacting showrunners, producers, writers, etc. And it's early, right? Animators and all that. It's early, but they're just as confused over there about where it's going as we are over here. And so I want to be at the tip of the spear on both sides, if that makes sense.
And I think that's the way to do it, right? Like I have a lot of these professional conversations with folks where they're like, is my X job, insert anything, product manager, software engineer, whatever it is, going to exist in Y years? And I'm like, you're asking the wrong question. It's not the question to be spending energy on, because two things. One is nobody can perfectly predict. Nobody has a map of like where this all goes. And two, like, what safer waters are you going to run to? Every single piece of knowledge work is going through the same transition, right? It's not like if you're a product manager, it's obvious that being a software engineer is safer, or vice versa, or any of these mixtures of things. I think the only thing that you can do as like the best thing to do is to literally be on the front lines, like trying to adopt, trying to play with it. And as a result, you'll end up navigating the waters. And so I use the analogy on a different episode of the Unsolicited Feedback podcast, which is, you got to stop searching for the map that's been totally revealed. And you got to start thinking about it as it's a game with the fog of war, the fog kind of covering all the tiles. And every step you take, it reveals the next 3 tiles. And you just keep going. And you eventually navigate your way to something like interesting and promising. And it feels like that's what you're doing. You're getting in the game. And you're gonna reveal the path as you do
free
it.
agent. It's way too early to commit to anything, because I'm still like, I'm trying to sharpen my vision in the fog of war, right? And get connected to smart people, get the landscape, what's going on, where are the opportunities, where the threats, start developing a point of view, run some experiments. It's a lot of fun. I love building this way.
Yeah.
Brian, anything, I know we covered a lot of ground, but anything I didn't ask that you wish I did?
Oh boy, we did cover a lot of ground. No, I would just say, look, I'm writing a lot about the intersection of AI and product teams. And if that's a topic that you're interested in, there's either my site, brianbalfour.com. I'm also publishing on LinkedIn and a little bit on Reforge, reforge.com/blog. I'm not really a big Twitter user these days, but yeah, those are the 3 places to find me. And look, if you're interested in this topic and have ideas around it, I'm interested in chatting. And so please reach out.
Great. Thanks for coming on. We didn't even get to do a catch up before, but now I feel like we don't need one because we just had a full catch up. And yeah, thanks for being so transparent and vulnerable as well. I know I get a lot more out of discussions like that, and I'm sure that listeners do as well. I appreciate it, and just congrats on everything you're doing and how you're going about it, and super excited to see where things go for you and for me. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what you create out of this.
Okay. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to The Next. If you enjoyed it, you can subscribe from your favorite podcast player. In addition to the podcast, which typically publishes weekly, there's also a weekly newsletter on Substack at thenextnext.substack.com. That's essentially for weekly accountability of the ground I'm covering, areas I'm tackling next, and where I could use some help as well. And it's a great area to foster discussion and dialogue around the topics that we cover on the show. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.